Hello, Cleveland, and welcome back to another edition of the Dogland Podcast. I am your host, Jackson McCurry. Rolling with me once again is Jack Duffin. Jack, how are you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm loving it. We're go now. So all the fun is happening. And cannot wait to get stuck into more of these. It's a fun, what is it? 6 weeks, I think. Who knows how many there are.
Yeah, it's going to be a blast. In case you guys missed Monday, we started our offseason deep dive. We started with the quarterback position. And today on this episode, we are talking about Jack Duffin's favorite position in pro football, the running back / fullback position. Jack, I know you get excited when we talk about the running backs and how they don't matter.
It's game changer. It's one thing that matters. People say quarterback's the most important position, but it's really fullbacks.
You and Tony Grossi would agree with that. So when we look at the running back room, Jack, and before I forget, with the podcast episode, there's also a article that is connected with this. You guys go to thedogland.com and check it out. Like I said, Monday was quarterback. Wednesday is running backs, and then tune back in next Monday and go to thedogland.com as well for wide receiver, so on and so forth. Every Monday and Wednesday, articles will be dropping. So when we talk about the running back position, Jack, so this is an interesting one because last year or 2020, we had 4 running backs on the roster: Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Dearness Johnson, and Andy Janovich. Those 4 came back. But technically, when you look at the Browns roster, Jack, there's 5 because we have Demetric Felton, who was a late round pick this year, had some flashes, showed his potential, but the Browns played him primarily at wide receiver. So while he's listed as a running back, he's technically a wide receiver by our logic and what we saw on the field. How do you coincide that when you're talking about the running back position and how many, like the numbers game, when we technically had 5, but there was technically 4 at the same time?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one because lots of people are like, oh, well, he just plays a bit of both. Does it really matter? And I would say the reason why it does matter is because there's only 53 roster spots, say 3 specialists, 25 on offense, 25 on defense, just to put it easily. And that says you got 1 fullback, 3 running backs, and 6 wide receivers. And so, something's got to give. Are you potentially going to give him one of those 3 running back roster spots, or are you going to give him one of them 6 wide receiver roster spots? And if you want to build out the wide receiver room, which we know is a massive focus for the Browns this offseason, if you're saying, hey, there's only 5 spots, then where does that leave the roster? Hey, you've got a few guys there, and we'll chat about that in the next episode. But if you say, hey, we're going to take one of those 3 running back roster spots, well, what gives there? So while he's sort of a backup third down running back and a backup slot wide receiver, which isn't really either a real position in an NFL roster. You generally have the 1 third down running back, and then you generally only really carry 1 slot receiver. You just pop someone else in there from the room. So it's one where we look at his snaps this season, 130 snaps on offense, 17 of them are in the backfield. So not that many at all, which is like 13%. You've got 17% were out wide. So he played more out wide as a wide receiver than in the running back. And if you look at in the slot and stuff there, you're looking at 70% of his snaps. So based on his usage, he was wide receiver. Was that more because there was a shortage at wide receiver? Could certainly be the case. And there was an overload at running back. That's there, but he basically needs to step up and prove to the team that he should be running back 3, or he needs to prove to the team he's one of the 6 wide receivers and they don't need to replace him there, because my gut says he's very, very, very on the bubble. And that's not a surprise. 6th round picks don't always finish training camp and get a spot on the 53. So it's not like he's a 2nd and 3rd round pick where you're going, they really must have seen something in this guy. I think there's a chance they try and stash him on the practice squad. And the reason why I want to touch on that, and we'll get into it more when we look at what they might do with the wide receiver room in the next episode, but you've got to look at these things because you can only have so many dudes on a roster. And the Felton discussion is an intriguing one.
This is true. And you also got to take into account what he does for special teams. He was the kick returner. I don't know if he played much more like on punt coverage or anything, because I feel like they did use him a little bit at punt returner, but they ultimately went with Donovan Peoples-Jones. So that could be another thing too. It just depends on how he performs at special teams during the preseason, during camp. That'll be something to watch with Felton going into 2022. So, Jack, we look at this running back room, and of course, it starts and it ends with Nick Chubb. He's locked in. I'd say right now he's the only guy locked in for sure going into 2022. Obviously, his contract doesn't take that big spike in pay until 2023. He did get his extension, but the cap number goes up a little bit for him in 2022. But at the end of the day, he's one of the top running backs in the league, second in rushing yards this year, only behind Jonathan Taylor. I think it's safe to say he's the only lock right now for this running back room going into 2022.
Yeah, so he's your lock-in at starting running back. He's here the next 2 years, definitely. And then the interesting thing is going to be, do they want to pay him $12.2 million for 2024 to play? Obviously, that's a discussion for down the line, but with all of these shows, we chat about not just what's now, but the 3-year look ahead, and that's what they're doing in the Browns building in Berea. So that's why we chat about this. They don't sit there and look in 1-year silos. So you're locking him in there. But one thing I was digging around was just looking at his snap percentage. So not just how many rushes and things he has, but how much he's on the field. And he's only had 1 year over 45% of snaps in his first 4 seasons, which I was surprised how low it is for what we'd consider him a locker, an RB1. So he's averaging over the 4 years, 47%. It was his second year, which had the highest spike. So he's the 6th highest paid running back in the NFL at the moment. And he's not getting that opportunity share that you would expect with that money invested in him. So can his body hold up? Who knows? Picked up a few knocks this year. And as he gets more and more touches over the next 2 years, that could be the case where they go, after those 2 years, we're going to let him go. And that's not uncommon. Running back is the shortest career in the league. Injuries hit you the hardest. So we're probably looking at 2 more years of Nick Chubb, and then that's that decision. For a running back to get a third contract is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly rare in the modern game. So we've probably lock him in for 2 years, and then you need to build something around there for 2024.
So looking at the rotational third down back, which is essentially the backup running back, there's 2 names. There's Kareem Hunt. There's Dearness Johnson. Kareem Hunt during the last year of his contract. And then you got Dearness Johnson, who's a restricted free agent. The Browns are going to decide who they think is going to be running back 2 this offseason. There's some inklings that it's going to be Kareem Hunt based on what's been said through the tea leaves, through sources, through reporting. We all kind of expected that just because Dearness Johnson played well in his role this year. He deserves to go out and potentially get a new contract in free agency. But at the same time, Kareem Hunt's due $6 million, which will probably make him the highest paid backup of any position in the league. I mean, this isn't just about 2022. Like you said, this is for down the road. You commit to Dearness Johnson, you move on from Kareem Hunt, and Dearness Johnson's potentially your backup running back for 2022 and 2023. But Kareem Hunt's, it's just the 1 year, and then the Browns are going to have to potentially look for something else.
Yeah, and that's the thing here, because is Kareem Hunt better than Dearness Johnson? Yes. I don't think anyone's going to sit here and have a debate and argue that Dearness Johnson's the better player, especially as a compliment to Nick Chubb. But with Kareem Hunt, it's one and done. He's the 13th most expensive running back in the league, and there's no guaranteed money on his contract, no dead cap. Do they want to keep him for 1 year? He's not going to extend because they ain't going to pay that sort of money to him again. He'll go and sign somewhere else. I just can't see it. We're going to know on the 6th of April, so it's not going to be a long wait for this. I know we're talking about 3 months away, but that's not actually that long for a roster decision to be confirmed. So I think they might want some more long-term security, because if you're going in and making that, and who knows what his injury situation is. He's picked up some bumps and bruises this year. They might be going, well, if we think he's going to miss 4 or 5 games a season, we've got this guy, Dearness Johnson, who's got a clean bill of health. do we go there instead? So all of those sort of things factor in, because there's no point paying a guy if you worry he's going to miss, say, quarter of the season. And lots of people talk about trading him. I think you get a fifth or a sixth, probably a sixth. Running backs aren't that desirable in trades. And he's got 1 year on his deal and he's 13th most expensive running back. So it's not like they're getting him on a bargain either. So with D'Ernest, right of refusal tender. So you tender him. That'd be a $2.433 million deal according to Over the Cap. And then any team in the league can offer him a contract. I think they get about 2-3 weeks to do it. They offer him a contract, and then he goes, yeah, I'm going to sign this, because he could reject it. So if they offer him a crappy deal and he don't want to sign it because he's like, I'll do 1 year and become a free agent, he doesn't have to sign it. But if he signs it, the Browns get a chance to match it, or they just lose him. There's no compensation or anything. You just lose him. Obviously, the other one is, and I haven't actually included this in the article, that's why you listen to the podcast as well, is you can trade him once he's on that tender. So it could be one that you want to move him on. And yeah, you're not going to get much, but hey, we're talking about 5th, 6th, that they could potentially do that. So it's one to keep an eye on. They might just go ahead and just go, rather than give him that tender, let's just give him like 3 years. 12 million over 3, which when you take out the 2 for the first one, it's basically 2, 4.5, 4.5. Certainly be a way they went. Gus Edwards, the Gus bus for the Baltimore Ravens, did a very similar deal. And yes, Gus had done more in his previous 2 years, but if you look at their season they had this year going into free agency, very similar between Gus Edwards and D'Ernest Johnson in terms of yards per carry, stuff like that. So certainly as a comp, and they could go, actually, we've got him secured for the next 2 years with a team option effectively in year 3 for, say, 4 million, 3.5 million. And that could give them some security of going, hey, Nick Chubb's banged up. We love Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb isn't capable of playing 70% of snaps, like some backup running backs do, some starting running backs do. And that could be a way. So I wouldn't rule out them having health concerns over Kareem Hunt, the short-termness of just a one and done, and going, actually, D'Ernest Johnson is physically in a much better shape. Let's give him, and they must have seen something, because everything made sense of almost moving on from him last offseason. And they kept him around.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting talking point, and it's going to be interesting to see what the Browns do. Signs are pointing towards they're going to keep Kareem Hunt and let D'Ernest go try restricted free agency, but there's options there too. Like you mentioned, the trade option. I didn't even realize that once he signs the tender, they could trade him, but then once again, he's under contract. The Browns could do what they want to do with him. And then you get to the depth running back. Like they've had guys like John Kelly, other names that have been on the practice squad over the years. This seems to be like, if they go this route, they could draft a guy. You did mention Demetric Felton, signing of undrafted free agent. So this is a guy that primarily will play on special teams. That's why if they move Felton back to running back, I would seem to give him the edge there, just because he has a year experience. He has special teams experience, but the Browns could go in a number of directions here when it comes to the third running back now.
Yeah, it could be intriguing what they do here, because if you'd like Felton there, Felton makes great sense. But I just don't know if they view him as a, hey, this is the guy, because if he is the heir to Kareem Hunt as the backup running back, then it works perfectly fine. But when Hunt wasn't there, he wasn't getting the snaps that I'd expect. So it was one where I was keenly looking at those games and going, what's going to happen? And they seem to prefer D'Ernest Johnson. So they've obviously got quite a lot of time for him. So, no, I don't feel like Felton will be the guy there. So, yeah, rounds sort of 5, 6, 7 or UDFA, I think's where they'll go. They'll just pick someone up. And, yeah, why not? And get that guy going, because if they choose D'Ernest Johnson, hey, that's 2 years and then they'll have an out. If they've got Kareem Hunt, it's 1 year and he's done. they'll need whichever of those options. They'll probably want someone else there if they don't view it as Felton to sort of develop behind. So, but yeah, you'll probably pick up a couple of UDFAs as well and just let them battle it out in camp. But no, it's an intriguing one where they'll have to find somebody.
Then we get to the fullback position. Andy Janovich has been the fullback the last couple of years. The Browns did cut his snaps about in half this year. Did play some special teams. He's been great at that. They do have Johnny Stanton, who they brought back on a future reserve deal last week, or this week. No, last week. Sorry, I'm getting my weeks mixed up. So I would think that's the competition. They may bring in somebody else, but it would seem like they'll bring Janovich back just because he's the guy. He's a veteran. Stefanski likes him. But he has no guarantees in this final deal. And it's going to be interesting to see what the Browns obviously do with the fullback position down the road.
Yeah, my thought at first is, like, are they just going to stop having a fullback? Because then suddenly you give that spot to almost Felton and your problems are all solved with how you do that, because you could go, hey, we've got him. He's our fourth back, because teams will generally have 4 in their backs room, which naturally, because we carry a fullback, it limits us to 3 wide receivers generally. So that could be a direction they go. But the fact that when Janovich was out, they instantly jumped on Stanton and promoted him just makes me think he does want a fullback on his roster. And special teams is obviously a part of it. So it just makes me think that they do want to carry one. But that could change. So that's sort of the wild card of, could that be the Felton role that potentially takes that? I don't think so, but never say never, because Stefanski seems to like having a fullback just for the handful of plays they use them. But I think it'll be Janovich, just because it's 1.6 million. It's barely anything in the grand scheme of it. And Stanton, if they really, really liked him, they would have kept him on the roster and then just waived Janovich when he came back from COVID. And that was the moment when I went, Stanton's not the guy. So I think Stanton will make the practice squad next year. That they seem to like having him around. And why not as a solid backup fullback? Not that it's a busy job across the entire NFL. Why not? Just leave it the way it is and we'll deal with it in a year's time.
Right. And if they do, get rid of the fullback, could be another spot for a 4th tight end. They only had 3 tight ends this year. So could be a 4th tight end, could be a 4th running back, like you mentioned. I mean, who knows what Andrew Berry would do if Stefanski was like, you know what, you just get rid of the fullback. Because even at the tight end spot, they were lining Brian up sometimes as a fullback. I think they may have lined Njoku up as a fullback at one point with a motion. I mean, if they could find a H-back that could do both, that could be the option. That's why I think Stanton might have a shot, because they were utilizing him in the preseason. And I know the preseason isn't like something to fully judge. They were using him out as a tight end at one point. So they could be still molding Stanton to be, hey, you're going to be our H-back. You'll be our 4th tight end. And then sometimes we'll motion you into the backfield to where you could be a lead blocker for Nick Chubb or whoever's running the ball. Certainly
makes sense, and it's a very realistic possibility there. So, we're only talking 50. I want to say it was 52 or 56 snaps on offense that Janovich played this year. Obviously, he missed a couple of games. Stanton probably played a handful. So, if we say 60 snaps across the year, you could probably get a tight end to cover and do that job, especially if you're a tight end 3, tight end 4, as you said. Whether it's Stanton or someone else, you could train someone to do that.
Johnny Stanton scores touchdowns too, so let's keep that in mind.
It's the playmaker.
He is the playmaker. Johnny Football, baby. The real Johnny Football, not that fake one that was here 7-8 years ago. Jack, as we wrap things up, go ahead and plug the series, plug your Twitter, and we'll get on out of here.
Yeah, so it's at Jack Duffin, DUFFIN. I feel confident on the Hunt take. Some people have come at me on Twitter on that before, that Kareem Hunt won't be here after the next season. So 2023, we won't have a Chubb Kareem Hunt double. I've actually bet $100 with some random dude. If you're listening, hopefully look forward to you paying me in a year's time. But yeah, it's intriguing. Stuff's going to happen. But keep enjoying the series. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. These guys are doing great work. Had some wicked guests on. So amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Duffin. You're a wicked guest yourself. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Jack McCurry08. Check out the Dogland podcast, or the Dogland Twitter at the Dogland. Check out the Dogland podcast, of course, and go check out the dogland.com, where all the written articles that Jack is writing about each position group will be available. That's the dogland.com. And until next time, Browns fans, as always, go Browns.
Go Browns.